Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Inspire. This is episode 5 of series 2. This week, I am joined by the absolutely incredible Julie Foley. Julie came to us off of seeing some of the advertising around the We Inspire, and the minute Julie and I had our initial conversation, I knew I had to get her on as a guest. Her journey and story is absolutely phenomenal. So, Julie, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. I'm really, really delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. How are you? Well?
I'm good, thank you. Really good. Excited about this.
I know. Do you know what? I'm always nervous doing these. I never know why, because I do them quite frequently now, but I'm always nervous. So bear with me. There might be blunders and stuff, and we don't bleep things out, so we're all good. Obviously, you've had an amazing career. For the listeners, I'll give a quick overview and then we'll go into a lot more. You've worked for some amazing brands. Molten Brown as their global customer experience director. You've been at L'Oreal, the Body Shop, and then you was also at what is the biggest retailer in the UK, Tesco's. So I'm super excited to hear about this. Before we do anything, though, I always like to start off with a bit of a quick fire round.
Sure.
So, and you have to be honest. It makes no difference. To be honest, the worse is better for me.
All right.
I want to see how random we can get this. So, what's the worst? Again, I told you I'd copy up at some point.
All right.
What's the worst movie you've ever seen?
The Meg.
The Meg?
Jason Statham. It's got like a giant shark in it. It's horrifically bad. It's a bit like a Snakes on the Plane, horrifically poor action movie.
He's all right, though. I think he can get away with it. When you look like him, you could literally do anything.
Yeah, too shabby.
Who was the last person you called?
My friend and old boss, Kate.
Okay. Worst subject at school?
History. I'm absolutely shocking at history, with history. And I'm just useless. I'm honestly a massive geek when it comes to history. No.
Honestly, it's one of them things that people would never know. Like I couldn't think of anything better than sitting down and kind of learning about things that have happened in the past and stuff. I think it's absolutely incredible. The war as well was a massive one for me. But I would read book after book just to kind of keep looking at kind of knowing a little bit more. So I'm a massive geek there. What's your go-to lazy dinner?
This will make anyone who knows me, who listens to this, will laugh because this is well known. I hate cooking. So it has been known for me to devour a family-sized box of Maltesers for my dinner.
What?
Yeah, I literally hate. If I won an exorbitant amount of money on the lottery, I would 100% have a chef cooking for me because I hate cooking. So, if I can get around that by eating something that I actually enjoy, I will. So Maltesers is often a go-to.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest, I had absolutely no idea what you was going to say, but that was at the back of the list. Maltesers. Brilliant. Literally. What's the best compliment you've ever received?
This is a tough one, actually, because... And it plays into the fact that you've had some great women talk on this podcast, and sometimes the mindset at which you come at this from. It's not always easy, I think, for females to regurgitate or reshare what they're good at. And I think that comes through in lots of different scenarios and examples in your life, particularly if you're looking for a new role, like trying to pull on those things that you're good at and you may have been complimented for. I guess if I was pushed, I would say that I'm somebody who champions the people that I have in my team or that are around me, particularly at work. And I don't ride on their coattails if the success is theirs. I make sure that they're known for what they've delivered, the part they've played, and I make it my business to be part of growing them and helping them find enjoyment in what they do so that they can thrive and grow and be the best version of themselves. And that's feedback I've had in my, previous roles as a line manager.
Amazing. And look, for us, we're going to get you to give a bit of an introduction to yourself in a minute. I'll be very open that when we had our first conversation, I come off the initial call. So before I go into podcasts, I always wanted to do a bit of an interview first of all to make sure that there's a story, not a story. I think that's not a journalist. That come across like a proper journo thing. So I do my interviews and make sure there's a story. That's pathetic. No, I like to make sure that it's going to land in the right way for you as well as us and the listeners and stuff. And I come off the call with you and I was like, wow. There was absolutely no doubt you was going to be successful in anything you chose to do with your backstory. And I think before we do the introduction, I think sharing that story to show where your resilience has come from is the best place to start, because I think it's defining, isn't it?
It is. I think it is. So, you know, as a child growing up, I had a pretty normal, standard youth, I guess. You know, I like to ride my bike, play out with my friends, was quite creative. I'm quite artistic and I continue to be quite artistic. You know, this was before technology. So, you know, actually going out and playing with your friends was a thing. You know, you see all these memes where you see people going, how do you know where everybody is? You see like all the bikes on the grass outside someone's house and that's how you can find people. That was essentially what my kind of growing up was like.
Do you know what is a weird thing, even for listeners, think about this, because someone said this to me once about playing out and I honestly, it nearly broke my heart. There was a day that it was the last day you ever played out.
Oh, God, there would have been, yeah.
How bad is that? I was heartbroken when someone put me in that, and I was like, that's heartbreaking.
Oh, my God.
So.
Oh, no. Yeah. So, God, yeah, that's gonna play on my mind now today. Yeah, so it was it was kind of a pretty non-eventful childhood, pretty average. And then, you know, what was quite interesting is I went to an all-girls Catholic secondary school. You had to take an entrance exam to get into the school. It wasn't all run by nuns, but there were a few nuns in the school. And it was a school my mum and my aunties had also gone to. So it was sort of one that was well known in our kind of background in our community. And like most teenagers working their way through the secondary school system, it came to year 10 and 11 where you start focusing on your GCSEs. And around that time, it had sort of become obvious that I'd lost quite a lot of weight. Very tired and, you know, wasn't particularly able to do the stuff I enjoyed doing as much as I could do in previous years. And also I found studying quite difficult in terms of keeping my focus and attention. And my mum sort of recognised that something wasn't quite right. It was quite bruised. My skin became quite bruised and quite pale and mottled. So she took me to our doctors, our GP surgery, and GP looked at me and said, do you know what this is? This is probably just a bit of stress and anxiety building up around studying in GCSEs, and try not to put so much pressure on yourself. You need to kind of just, you know, steady yourself in terms of not overdoing it and get some good night's sleep under your belt and things will right themselves. And it took 3 visits to my GP to finally, well, my mum actually really persevered, so fair play to her, that we saw one of the like top GPs in our practice, and she looked at me and said, you know what, I'm going to send you for a blood test. So had that done, and they said you'll get the results in 14 days and we'll be able to kind of take it from there. So off we went home, thought no more of it. And then at 11 o'clock that night, we got a phone call on the house phone from a local hospital saying, we've just had your blood counts back from your blood test and you need to come to hospital now. You're severely unwell. So both my parents sort of, and I, not really knowing the full extent of what that meant, got in the car, went to hospital, met with a consultant and a nurse, and what they sort of delivered to us in that moment sort of was where I guess the world sort of sort of started to spin off in a direction none of us had sort of expected at that point, or up until that point. So they told us that, and I was 15, a week away from my 16th birthday, that I had leukemia, a very rare form of leukemia. And based upon the blood counts that had come back, I had 2 weeks to live unless they intervened. There was an intervention. And then the next kind of blow was, what can that intervention be, given that we haven't got a lot of time to kind of work with? So the kind of first option that they explored with us was a bone marrow transplant, which is really the only form of treatment that can essentially cure you, provided your body doesn't reject the bone marrow that is introduced to it. And the best place to start is your siblings. So do we have a sibling that might match? So, very quickly, my brother and sister were brought in. They were tested, but unfortunately didn't match. So then the next step was an experimental chemotherapy drug, which hadn't really been tried ever on anyone below the age of about 60. So this type of leukemia was more prevalent in the elderly. So it was really, really experimental in terms of, how is this going to work? It may not, but we haven't really got any other cards to play at this stage. So obviously I was under 16, so I'm still technically a child. So the decision really fell to my parents, and we agreed that it was the right thing to try. So I was taken into Hammersmith Hospital in London, and it's kind of more commonplace now. This, people probably wouldn't even bat an eyelid, but at the time, we're talking like 20 years ago, I was put in a room on a ward. Anyone visiting me, be that a nurse, a doctor, consultant, or my parents, had to wash their hands, wear gloves, wear aprons, wear shoe covers and face masks to come in and visit me. And I remained in that room having treatment for about 3 months. So I had what's called a Hickman line put into my heart, into the main artery of the heart, so that they could pump chemo through it, and also platelets and blood transfusions as well. And there I remained. And it was a very kind of out of body experience, if I'm really honest. I wasn't able to obviously leave that room, because essentially what the type of chemo does is it shuts down your immune system. If you imagine like a computer, you shut it down, you wipe it completely, and then you reboot it. So there's a period of time in which you're at high risk of infection. So they cannot chance anything coming into your environment that could provoke an infection that could ultimately kill you. So I was in this room and having this treatment, and I remember, and it's quite funny about The Meg being the movie, the worst movie I've ever watched, because in that room I had an exercise bike and a TV that had a VHS slot on it to watch videos.
A lot of our listeners are not even going to know what a VHS is, right? What is that?
You haven't lived. Go Google it. So I just watched on repeat, like Snatch and Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels.
They
were like my favourite movie. Oh, they
are great films.
Yeah. So Jason can do good things.
Yeah.
Just sadly, The Meg wasn't one of those for me. So that was my world for 3-4 months. And during that time, my head teacher came to see me in hospital, because obviously the outlook was quite bleak, and said, look, I don't think it's appropriate for us to put you forward for your exams. We're going to suggest that once you're through this, hopefully we'll look at, taking you back a year and resubmitting you for your GCSEs. And at that point I was like, there is no way in hell I am not doing my GCSEs. There's no way in hell I'm going back a year. I'm just not doing it. And I think this is the start of a reinvention of my personality, where I became this tenacious, focused, resilient, slightly more ballsy than I may have been before individual, where I was like, this isn't going to beat me, and therefore I'm not going to put my studies back, and I'm sure as hell not going to die from this. And I got through that treatment. I came out of hospital, still had to be essentially in isolation. And I continued treatment at home and carried on. And I did all my GCSEs, so I completed them. So that was a real, it was a catalyst experience in my life that set me up to understand who I wanted to be and how I wanted to move through the world with regards to my personality, my mentality, and my desire to get on. So yeah, that was kind of where it all started, I think, Terry.
Yeah. I think it's there's no words really, is there? And I think this is why I always reflect on kind of what we're doing with this podcast and the stories that we get to share. And I think the resilience that you showed then, there was absolutely no doubt you was going to be successful in anything. But just the way you attack something like that at such a young age.
Yeah.
It was just never in doubt. It's kind of like a big fuck you. I'm going to do this. And I think that's the biggest thing. And yeah, well, as I said, when we to the listeners, when Julie and I first spoke about that, I think I'd said that it kind of moved me in a way that you sit there and go, wow, that's an inspiration. And this is the whole premise of this podcast. So what a way to start. Obviously, it's not, you're in remission still, aren't you? You're still in remission.
So the kind of chemotherapy it's quite funny actually, because the type of chemo I had in terms of medical trials, it had only, other than the elderly then who had it, but medical trials to kind of allow it to be used. The smallest animal that they had tested it on at the time was a horse, which is obviously significantly bigger than a human. And now over like the course of the last 20 years where I've been I live with it, they've refined that down to like mice they've tested this drug on. So the kind of how they've managed to refine it is absolutely remarkable. The reason that's interesting is because the side effects I experienced from that drug when I took it, because it was in quite a primitive form, I guess you could say, were a bit random. So the obvious things you probably would associate with a blood cancer, like losing your hair, I put on a lot of excess weight, I was on steroids, I was covered in cold sores, my mouth was covered in ulcers made it so painful to eat or drink. But then some of the side effects alongside all of that stuff that is probably more commonly known was like, I tried to pull my nails off, and I was like running at the wall, and like, it was very strange. It was a very, very strange sort of experience to go through, because where I was maybe losing my identity and maybe control over my body, my mind was all there, and I knew exactly what my purpose was, and it was to survive and to carry on. So, I'm in remission. So there is a 40% chance it can relapse. But you know what? I don't focus on the 40%. I focus on the 60. So, that's where it's at for me.
Wow. And I think we spoke about it again in the pre kind of conversation that I see a few posts a week where people are talking about some of the illnesses that people are facing and stuff like that. And you're clearly one of those people that they should be listening to and kind of going, don't let it stop. Don't stop. You carry on. You will come out the other side. So look, it's an incredible, incredible story. And as I said, one that I feel like it's a privilege for us to have it on our podcast. So thank you so much. So look, let's get into it now, because let's not make everyone cry for that long. They're going to be listening to this in the gym or something, and we probably ruined their morning.
Spit their cornflakes out.
Yeah, cheers for that, Tel. You told me this was going to be inspiring. I'm in bits here. So look, you've had a phenomenal career, but you wanted to go into HR because of the minute you kind of started fighting the cancer, like getting to uni and stuff like that, you knew you wanted to be in HR. So you went into HR. Yeah. You've done that in again, it's mad. You've not done anything small. You took a HR role for Tesco. It's like that alone is nuts because of the size of the beast.
Yeah.
And obviously you've done HR there, you've developed forward and you've gone into what everyone is focusing on now, which is that experience side, which is it's pivotal to any brand. Yeah. How did HR set you up into that move and how did it come about?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, let's be honest, most people leaving university or indeed leaving school or college, most people haven't got a clue what they want to do for the rest of their life. And they say, it might even have gone up now, but on average, you have 8 different career journeys in your lifetime. You probably know that better than I do. But I guess HR felt like a good place to start because one thing that I am really passionate about is people. And HR ultimately, and you can argue, are responsible for an internal customer.
Yeah.
So it's not in the traditional sense of that customer that maybe shops your brand or interacts with your website, but it's ultimately a customer that you are delivering a set of service and expectations to and for, and they're the best people to tell you whether you're getting it right or wrong.
Yeah.
So I started off in HR, and the thread of HR that I was most inspired by from a generalist capacity was talent, people, learning, development, and working with our internal stakeholder and customer through those avenues and those channels. And within Tesco, it's an enormous organisation. I was very privileged to work in 2 areas of Tesco. One was in sort of more pure play HR in Central Europe. And then the other was in international leadership and development. And I got to meet, from our Chinese MBAs, graduates, through to CEOs who were placed out in Turkey, India, the US, and so on through my time, and work with them on their programs, their development, and get to understand how they tick and what they need in order to be successful, and not just as somebody in the world of work, but also as the whole person, because these people are going into or being fast tracked into incredibly senior and high pressured roles. And you can't do that pretending to be half a person. You've got to bring your whole self to that. So that was a massively inspiring time for me at Tesco. And from that, I wanted to continue growing within the space of talent and learning and development. And that's where I found my way into the Body Shop under the L'Oreal umbrella. And I worked my way up from the most mature market, the Body Shop, being the UK market. We had 300 plus stores across franchise and distribution, around 3,000 members of staff that we were responsible for. And I headed up all of the L&D team there. And then I was getting more and more involved in what was going on a global platform too, from an L&D point of view. And I naturally sort of migrated into the central team. I had really good relationships with our counterparts globally and had a fairly decent foothold in that community in terms of respect and influence. So it felt like the next natural move. And then whilst working within the international team, we got involved in a lot of the L'Oreal projects, such as their approach to selling and experience, how you do that across kind of salon, prestige brands, and then your standalone brands, such as like the Body Shop, as that was deemed at the time. And then how do you turn a brand into a bricks and mortar brand, which is not something L'Oreal at the time had heaps of experience doing. So I worked very closely with their team on bringing Kiehl's to the UK. How do you set up a retail store? What's important? What do you need, not just from a people point of view, but from an operational perspective too, and from a technical perspective. And then back in the Body Shop, this opportunity to work much more on the marketing and activation of customer experience and engagement side came up, and I interviewed and was successful, and my role then ultimately became responsible for all of global L&D, but all of customer engagement from, how do we talk to people within our CRM database? How do we target them in store? How do we bring digitalized solutions to the retail estate, such as skincare, diagnostic tools, makeup expert programs, and so on? And that for me was when I really started to get excited about the opportunity we had to not just influence the internal customer, but how we could drive the most outstanding experience for the external customer too, and drive ultimately customer lifetime loyalty, not just a quick transaction, a one hit, and just a very sort of overly churning sort of experience for customers. And beauty is such a connecting way of reaching people. Skincare as well in particular, it's such a loyalty driving category that you could really get to know your customer and really build a relationship with them, because they're showing their most vulnerable side to you through the products they're purchasing, because they need to share with you why they need to purchase them or what they're looking for in order for you to find the most suitable solutions for them. So that really got me all fired up. So my time at the Body Shop was absolutely phenomenal for helping me decide and find where I wanted to go next. And there wasn't a role there that I could move into that was senior. So that's when I went across to Molten Brown and became CX director, and just have had the best 6 years there, building a CX strategy from nothing to something, figuring out who our customer was because we didn't know, understanding how to deliver a great customer service experience throughout the journey, and how to enhance our experiences that we deliver across our omni-channel business, which is a complex one of 7 channels. So, yeah, it's been quite a ride.
It's one of them roles now that seems to be more of them coming around, isn't it? It's not every business has one, do they?
No.
But customer centricity is obviously a huge focus for a lot of businesses. We hear it all the time. We want to be customer centric. We want to be customer first. But what does it take to really be that customer champion?
Another great question. I think it takes a couple of different things from my opinion and my perspective. And it's a lot harder for organizations that are mature or more well-established to do this, but it's to kind of hold your hands up and admit, maybe we haven't quite got this right. And that could be how we position the brand, or the brand needs to adapt, evolve, or change because the customer is doing the same. Maybe even though we've got things that are so heavily ingrained into our ecosystem as an organization, we need to go back and check they're still the right things we should be doing, because ultimately, if they're not serving the customer, why are we doing them? We need to ask ourselves that difficult question. So there's that kind of vulnerability element, I guess, to being customer centric truly and championing the customer. You need to have a good hard look at yourself internally to make sure that in every dark corner of your business, the customer and it's the focus around delivering great experiences and a great environment for your customer is considered, even in those dark corners you wouldn't think to look. And I think coupled with that is having authentic empathy for that customer who shops your brand, and truly making it your business, regardless of your role within an organization, to understand what they need from you and how your role plays a part in delivering that. And it's not the CEO's job, in my opinion, to find that out for somebody who maybe is in the finance team as a finance analyst, or is a product owner, or is an HR advisor. It's down to you as an individual to take that responsibility to figure that out. How do I play a role in driving the best in class customer experience for our customer?
Definitely. And that does bring me on nicely, because I'm or it sounds really weird. Like everywhere I go now, I judge customer experience. Like,
right.
It's weird as well. So I could lose my business with what I'm about to state.
Oh no!
I'm not a massive e-com customer.
Right.
I'm really not. I love being in a store. I absolutely love it because the experience is different, like that one-to-one feel. So for me, like I've got this one client, one brand that I think I could talk about one store. I wouldn't say the brand. There's this one store. There's the Reese store in Ashford, near to where we're based in the outlet. I think Molten Brown have got one down there as well.
We are, yeah.
I love that store, by the way. And the experience I get from him is better than any.
Yeah.
And I would say not like it would be a country mile that any experience I've had to come close. He literally, every time I go in there, he kind of, it's weird. I don't know if he should be doing this, but it was like, because they get stock every day.
Yeah.
Because it's an outlet, they get their stocks in that morning. And he's like, I always put this aside because you come all the time. So I put them because I know that's you. And then it got to the point where he took my number and was like, I'll WhatsApp you with pictures of the stuff that we've got here. Wow. He honestly, I would pay good money to have him in my business. Yeah. It's the best experience at Reese I've ever seen. Yeah. So I love a retail point of kind of customer experience for me. I think it's just incredible. But in your opinion, who is offering a first-class customer experience?
So I think this is almost an impossible question to answer. And to have a go at answering it, you've partly stolen my response, by the way.
Love that.
But because I think, and of course I'm going to say this because I've already set it up that I'm passionate about people and the internal customer as well as the external. But I think people are the lifeblood and the soul and the humanization of your business. So whether you are a purely e-com business, there are still people running that business and are still putting their love, care, attention, hard work, blood, sweat and tears into making it the best e-com business it can be. There's still people packing those boxes to send those products out to customers around, the UK or the globe or wherever. It still fundamentally comes back to people and the difference they can make. And they can do that often in ways without it costing any money. A bit like that example you just shared about Reese, where that guy, it's not costing him anything to do that other than his time. And the level of experience that's giving to you has brought you to a place where you want to share it. You want to talk about it. You're happy to kind of tell others about that experience and celebrate it. And for me, that's why I think it's so hard, because I do think often the best brands are less about the brand experience, the textbook or the course they've been on or the e-learning they've completed. It's about ultimately the individual that you encounter in any given brand on any given day and how they have this incredible superpower to make or break your experience. Now, I can give you a few of mine because these are down to often the individuals I've worked with or come into contact with, should I say. I'd say Pret is a biggie. So when I was commuting 5 days a week in and out of London and around the UK in previous roles, I was always in Pret. Like I literally survived, I think 80% of my meals were Pret, followed by a box of Maltesers. So, it meant that those individuals I was coming into contact with in Pret, I'm a captive audience to them. I'm a loyal customer to them. How are they going to make a difference to my day? And for those experiences, they knew they needed to be quick. They know they needed to be polite and courteous. And then what they did that I didn't expect, and this is why it's a great experience, is they surprised and delighted me. So they gave me my coffee on the house, or they, a bit like you, had my sandwich out in my regular Pret that I would always go to ready for me as I walked in so I could speed up, proceedings on a given day, respect the fact I'm on a conference call and buy them a lunch and, pick up on those body language signals. So Pret for me is a great one, and I've done a lot of listening on other podcasts around Pret and how it was kind of established, and they are all about their people, and they're all about giving autonomy to their people to do the right thing for their customer, which is incredible. Another one personally I've had great experience with is Audi, and from Audi as in cars. I was
going to say that cannot
not Audi the supermarket.
That is like when they throw everything at you.
Yeah, no, not Audi the supermarket. Audi the car brand. So, in my role, I've been lucky to have company cars and so on. But where I've been in a position where I've got to choose my own car, I've always gone to Audi. And actually, I only deal with this same two people over the last, I think, 12 years of having Audis. The same two people make it their kind of business to deal with me when I come in to, have the car serviced or to look for a new car, or when I've had kids, finding solutions for me in terms of what vehicle to move to next potentially, or checking in how I'm getting on with it. And did I know that this button does that? Now, they are an incredibly attentive, I feel, certainly to me as a customer, an incredibly attentive brand. And I think that's why they've got that quality assured standard that they're sort of known for. And then if we look sort of more internationally, a couple of brands that I've been fortunate to come across in my global roles have been Neiman Marcus from the US perspective. Always had brilliant big box retail, but concessionally based brand experiences. I've always had incredible experiences within Neiman Marcus, and they always kind of shake it up in terms of what they do to activate the experience. Like they'll have a DJ in store, we can go up and put a request in, or so they always do something a little bit left field. And Mecca is another one, which is an Australian / New Zealand brand. Sorry, they've got about 300 stores out there, and they are doing some incredible things in the beauty space, which would give, I think, Sephora, who are launching this week in the UK in Westfields, and potentially even the Space NKs of the world, a bit of competition, because they do it with such heart. They do business with such heart, and they're not afraid to talk about sort of their ambitions and their next steps. They don't keep that guarded. They're very open with their customer about the journey and trajectory they're on as a beauty organization. And they're an organization that's got a heavily weighted female leadership team. So for me, that's also incredibly inspirational.
And everything that we talk about, kind of when you revert back to customer experience, it's more around humanization, isn't it? It's that human touch to making that experience.
Yeah.
In roles, though, obviously, we've all got kind of metrics to work towards.
Sure.
How from a customer first approach, how do you drive that through your teams? But more importantly, how can you track that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's looking at the hard and the soft metrics and KPIs, really. And it's going to look different from somebody who's working in maybe a physical store to somebody who's working on, the website or on social media or in finance or in HR. But I think, having a really clear vision around the importance of delivering an exceptional customer experience from the point of view of longevity of your brand and how you will weather the storm. And I think COVID was a brilliant example of that, because, there are a lot of brands that didn't survive that experience. And, if you reflect back on maybe why that is, you've got to bed the question around what does that customer experience, or how did that customer experience look before COVID, during COVID, and then obviously arriving at its destination of no longer existing. And it's about being able to, I think, within those hard and soft KPIs, having autonomy over how hard you can push it. So, the obvious choices are, you come into a retail store, we're looking at things like satisfaction, NPS. In customer service, it's looking at, again, satisfaction, NPS. But a big thing that we did at Molten Brown, which for the organization really shook it to its core, and it was a controversial move on my part, was to take away mystery shopping. Now, the business had done mystery shopping for about 15 years prior to me coming on board. And, you know, I took my time over it because it wasn't a small decision to take. But what we discovered is we were spending about 60% of our time across the L&D team, CX team, and retail teams arguing the toss over whether that experience went the way the mystery shopper had said it had, rather than looking at, are we measuring the right things? And does it really matter to our actual customer? And how do we know? So we took mystery shopping away and actually moved to a pure play customer feedback experience. It was incentivized, that gave us feedback that you cannot argue with because it's the customer's point of view of their experience within our business. And that took us from not just a place of having what we thought was an understanding of our brand to a place of actually understanding our brand and how we're perceived. But also commercially, it grew us exponentially because we were delivering an experience that the customer wanted rather than the experience we thought they wanted, and that we were giving because we were talking to ourselves. So, you know, you've got all the obvious sort of dashboard KPIs, but I think ultimately that customer feedback and that connection with the customer telling you what they truly believe and think is invaluable. And it does correlate with your commercial success. Absolutely. Without a doubt.
So the next question for me is what this podcast is about. And it's about empowering women. What does that mean to you?
Bit like you, Terry, I have a little girl. So I've got 2 children. I've had both my children whilst in a senior role, so as a director. And a bit like the old story of being poorly, a lot of people said to me in my circle, "Are you sure this is the right job to be doing when you've got kids?" And
really?
Yeah, like you're traveling a lot. You're not, you know, my daughter, when I was first at Molten Brown and started childcare, she started childcare. She was in childcare 12 hours a day. Now, I'm not saying that's right and I'm not saying that's wrong, but that's what needed to happen in order for me to do my job, and for me to deliver what needed to be delivered at that time. Now, the world of, you know, COVID and hybrid working has evolved incredibly since then. But for me, it was important that, you know, when I came home after a business trip and walked in my front door, yes, she'd give me the cold shoulder more often than not. But it was important for her to understand that mummy has to work, and this is the type of work mummy does. And, you know, you can do anything and it can involve you traveling the world as well. And it's not just, you know, dad that goes out and works and comes home and
100%,
you know, puts the food on the table. And, you know, I grew up in a house where my dad was, you know, the breadwinner, and my mum worked, but it was never respected in the same way as my dad's work. And I knew, again, from that sort of experience growing up around that I didn't want to be that person that relied on a man. And I think that's why it's important. It doesn't necessarily have to come down to money. It's important for women to feel like they can do and they can achieve anything they set their heart on and they put effort into and are focused enough to go after.
Yeah, and I think we spoke about this before, didn't we? That for me, I get a lot of questions around kind of what my purpose of doing this is, and it's really frustrating sometimes. Like I have to. I think, frustration. It is frustrating. I was going to say some people might get annoyed with that. No, it is annoying because I like pretty much like yourself. I've got a responsibility to my daughter. She's watching me. If I kind of don't celebrate this, how can I celebrate her?
Yeah.
It's a very contradictive kind of approach. If you can go there, but I'm not celebrating it. So like that's why this is so important. And I've just got this thing where like I just want my daughter to be like that daddy's hero. Like you know that kind of my dad's that person that's made me be the person I am. and she will never have a ceiling put in front of her ever.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone should.
No.
So yeah, I think it's an incredible answer, that one. Who inspires you?
I think personally, I've got sort of a personal person or go-to that I would say inspires me, and then also personal, but probably more professionally because of how I've gotten to know them. So I guess the person that inspires me is my daughter. I have a little boy as well, and he's pretty cool, but he's still quite small. So the reason I picked my daughter in terms of who inspires me is because a bit sort of leaning on what I said there around the childcare piece. So, you know, from a very young age, 9 months, she was in childcare 12 hours a day, and she had to have been such a resilient little bunny to be thrust into, you know, a scenario like that with a stranger ultimately to begin with other kids that she doesn't really know for a long old day. A lot of time she was spent with people that weren't her parents because her parents were working. And a lot of people, as I say, have said, oh, are you sure that's the right thing to be doing? I wouldn't do that. But actually, now I look at her as a almost 6-year-old. She will try anything. She does 5 different clubs a week. She gives everything a go. She is so kind. She is so empathetic. She, you know, we have our parent-teacher evenings. Every time we meet with the teachers, they say she's the one child in the class that picks up if someone's not quite right in her class, even if it's not from her immediate friendship group.
Wow.
And she goes out of her way to kind of check in with them and bring them into kind of the fold of the rest of the class.
What piece of feedback to get as a parent?
Yeah, it's
kindness. That alone would be incredible, wouldn't it?
Yeah, she's operating on a different level of emotional intelligence, which I think is inspiring for someone of her age. And I think that's only going to be a terrific thing for her as she grows up. My other person would be a lady I alluded to, and she'll cringe if she hears this. She used to be my boss at the body shop, and she's now my dearest friend. And an absolute, she's just a shining light for everything in my life, be it professional, personal. When you're having those wobbles on a day and thinking, oh, I don't know if I'm that good, or can I really do this? Or you have that self-doubt playing in, or that mind talk creeping in. She is the person that steadies my ship, and that's a lady called Kate Shelford. And she herself has had an absolutely phenomenal career, and has been a working mum, and has just been truly incredible. And I'm sure a lot of the people that will listen to this will know her because she's in that retail space too. But I'm so grateful to have her in my world. She's amazing.
We always have a question from our previous guest. So our previous guest was the incredible Audrey Vincent. So again, Audrey was talking past tense, is the head of online trading for Southern Europe for one of the biggest online players in the world, down at ASOS. Her question for you: what is the place of empathy in leadership?
Thank you, Audrey. Empathy is paramount. And I believe that where we had to divorce ourselves from that human interaction again during COVID. Sorry, I keep talking about COVID, but I think it was such a pivotal moment in any business on many different levels. I think where we divorced ourselves from that physical interaction and we relied so heavily on Zoom and email and WhatsApp and Slack and whatever else, the ability to understand and connect with people in a different way that was less dimensional weirdly forced us to be more empathetic and understanding. And I think also experiencing and leading people through a time when no one quite knows how this is going to play out unleashes vulnerability. And I think in a way, vulnerability and empathy go hand in hand, because if someone is able to be vulnerable and share where they're coming from, it's you've got to be a really not very pleasant type of person to reject that and not demonstrate a degree of empathy and draw that person in and make them feel safe, because they've given you that space to be vulnerable and let you in. And I think empathy is absolutely paramount to great leadership, because unless you care, unless you're prepared to really understand the people that work for you in your organization or work with you in your organization, you're only going to get so far. And it comes back to the power of the human being, regardless of what type of brand and what type of platform you operate via.
Amazing. So now you get to leave your question for Holly from Charlotte Tilbury, which you've already texted over to me.
I have, yeah.
You have. Do you remember what it was?
No.
So I'll read the question out. So the question that you've got for Holly is, what is the most difficult experience you have faced that has taught you the most about yourself, and what did you learn? Which I know, Holly. This is going to be. I love Holly. I've known Holly for about 5-6 years, something like that. She's wicked. Right. This is one of them questions that she's going to be like, right, okay. This will get her out now. So she's going to love you for this.
Sorry, Holly.
And look, my final question is the same question I end every single episode, which is, if you could go back and give yourself some advice, or give advice to someone that's starting out their career, what would it be?
Take every opportunity that comes your way and be kind to yourself. I think it's easy to beat up on ourselves and find out identify very quickly all the things we didn't do so well and give ourselves a bit of grief about that. And then what that tends to do is make you shy away from opportunity. So I would say take every opportunity that comes your way, because you never know what might come of it, and be kind to yourself along the way.
Do you know you're the third guest that said about being kind to themselves?
Really?
Yeah. So it says a lot.
Yeah.
So look, guys, that is the end of episode 5 of We Inspire. We hope we picked it up in a more of a lighter note. I know we may have made you cry.
Yeah.
But look, this story was super, super emotional and super personal, but an incredible career. And some great insights there. So, Julie, thank you so much for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure for me to kind of hear your story. So next week, I will be catching up with Holly to ask the question that Julie has given her. I cannot wait for that question. Holly has had an incredible career, like everyone we're speaking to. Currently the head of talent down at Charlotte Tilbury, that is one of the most exciting brands on the planet right now. So super excited to speak to her. And Julie, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.